5 signs God is pulling away from you and you didn't notice. You didn't notice when it started. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There was no moment where everything suddenly broke. It was quieter than that, subtle, almost invisible. And that's what makes it dangerous, because the most important shifts in your life rarely announce themselves. They happen in silence. While everything still looks normal on the outside, you still pray. You still believe. You still think you're close to God. But something feels different now, and you can't fully explain it. The peace you used to feel doesn't come as easily. The connection that once felt natural now feels distant. And instead of questioning it deeply, you've learned to live with it, to adjust, to move on as if nothing really changed. But what if something did change, and you just didn't recognize it? What if the silence you've been feeling isn't just a season, but a signal? Not punishment, not rejection, but a response, a shift in the way God is engaging with you. Because there are moments when God does not force His presence. He allows distance to reveal something you've been avoiding. And the truth is, most people never see it happening. They assume everything is fine because nothing feels obviously wrong. They continue their routine, their habits, their prayers. But deep inside, something is no longer alive the way it used to be. And instead of confronting it, they slowly become comfortable with the distance. Listen carefully, not with fear, but with honesty. Because what you're about to hear is not meant to push you away. It's meant to wake you up, to help you see what you've been missing, to recognize what your soul has been trying to tell you before it becomes something harder to reverse. And the first sign is not what you think it is. There was a time when something inside you reacted immediately. You didn't need anyone to tell you something was off. You felt it. A quiet resistance, a weight in your spirit, not shame, not fear, but awareness. A sense that something didn't align with who you were becoming. That voice didn't condemn you. It corrected you. It pulled you back before you went too far. But lately, that voice has been quieter. Things that once bothered you don't hit the same anymore. Decisions that would have made you pause now pass without resistance. You notice it, but you don't stop. You feel it, but you don't respond. And instead of confronting that shift, you start explaining it away. You call it growth. You call it maturity. But deep down, something knows that's not the truth. Conviction is not pressure, it's presence. When God is close, your spirit is sensitive. You don't drift easily because something inside you stays alert. But when that sensitivity fades, it doesn't always feel like loss. It can feel like relief, like things got easier, like the tension disappeared. But what if that tension was never the problem? What if it was protection? Because the absence of conviction is not freedom, it's exposure. You can move without resistance. You can justify what you once questioned. You can continue without interruption. And that's what makes it dangerous. Not because something is forcing you away, but because nothing is stopping you anymore. And when that internal resistance fades, most people don't notice the shift until they are already far from where they used to stand. Pay attention to what no longer bothers you. Because sometimes the first sign that something is changing is not what you feel, but what you stopped feeling. And if that awareness is fading, then something deeper is already moving. You still pray. The words are there. The habit is still alive. You know what to say. You know how to start. You know how to end. From the outside, nothing seems broken. If someone looked at your life, they would say you're consistent, you're disciplined, you're doing what you're supposed to do. But inside that moment of prayer, something feels different now. Not wrong in an obvious way, but not alive either. It feels like something is missing, and you can't ignore that feeling anymore. There was a time when prayer felt like connection. It felt personal. You didn't just speak, you experienced. There was a sense that someone was listening, that something real was happening beyond your words. But now, it feels like you're repeating something instead of entering something. The words leave your mouth, but they don't seem to go anywhere. And the silence that follows does not feel like peace. It feels like distance. This is where many people get confused, because they think prayer is about saying the right things, staying consistent, keeping the routine. But prayer was never meant to be performance. It was meant to be presence. And when that presence fades, the routine can continue without you realizing that the connection has weakened. You keep going, but something deeper is no longer responding the way it used to. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to adjust to that emptiness. You stop expecting anything to happen. You lower your sensitivity. You tell yourself that this is normal, that this is just how it feels sometimes. But what if it's not just a phase? What if it's a signal? What if the emptiness is not the problem itself, but the evidence of something shifting beneath the surface? Because when God feels distant, it is not always because He disappeared. Sometimes it is because something in you has stopped reaching the same way. Not intentionally, not consciously, but gradually, through distraction, through comfort, through things that slowly take the place of what once mattered most. And prayer becomes a reflection of that shift. You need to pay attention to how your prayer feels, not just whether you are doing it, because it is possible to keep speaking while no longer connecting. It is possible to maintain the habit while losing the meaning. And the most dangerous part is that this can continue for a long time without being confronted. If your prayers feel empty, do not ignore it. Do not normalize it. That feeling is not random. It is revealing something. And if you are honest enough to face it, you may begin to understand what is really changing inside you. There are areas in your life that used to disturb you, not because you were perfect, but because something inside you refused to stay the same. You felt tension when you were out of alignment. You felt a pull to grow, to adjust, to move away from what didn't reflect who you were becoming. That tension was not punishment. It was direction. It was evidence that something alive inside you was still responding to God. But now, something has changed. You are no longer fighting in the same places. You are no longer questioning what once made you pause. Things that used to feel wrong now feel normal. Not because they became right, but because you became comfortable. And comfort can be deceptive. It can feel like peace when it is actually silence. It can feel like stability when it is actually stagnation. Growth always creates friction. When God is close, He does not leave you unchanged. He presses, He exposes, He challenges what you try to ignore. Not to break you, but to refine you. But when that pressure disappears, many people feel relief. They think something improved. They think they matured. But what if that pressure was never the problem? What if it was the very thing keeping you awake? Because when you stop being challenged, you also stop being shaped. You begin to settle into patterns that no longer confront you. You stop examining your choices. You stop questioning your direction. You move forward without resistance, and that feels easier. But easier does not always mean better. Sometimes it means you are no longer being interrupted. And when nothing interrupts you, nothing corrects you either. This is where distance grows without being noticed. Not through rebellion, not through sudden decisions, but through quiet acceptance. Through allowing things to remain that should have been confronted. Through choosing comfort over transformation. And over time, what once felt temporary becomes permanent. What once felt wrong becomes familiar. Pay attention to where you no longer feel challenged, because the absence of challenge is not always peace. Sometimes it is permission, not from God, but from your own willingness to stop resisting. And when that happens, you don't feel far from God. You feel fine. And that is exactly why it goes unnoticed. If you are no longer being stretched, questioned, or corrected in any area of your life, you need to stop and look deeper. Because God does not grow what He does not confront. And if nothing in your life is being confronted anymore, something in your connection has already shifted. At the beginning, you felt it. Something was off. Not dramatically, not in a way you could explain clearly, but enough to make you pause. There was a slight discomfort, a subtle awareness that something was changing. You couldn't name it, but you could feel it, and for a moment, you questioned it. You wondered if something inside you was drifting, if something in your connection was weakening. But you didn't stay in that moment long enough. Life continued. Responsibilities filled your time. Distractions took your focus. And that subtle feeling you once noticed slowly faded into the background. Not because it was resolved, but because you adapted, you adjusted to the new normal. And what once felt unfamiliar became routine. This is how distance grows without resistance. It does not always come with pain. It often comes with silence. A quiet shift where nothing feels urgent anymore, where nothing seems broken enough to fix. And because of that, you stop paying attention. You stop asking deeper questions. You stop checking the condition of your own spirit, and over time, something dangerous happens. You lose your ability to recognize the distance. What once would have made you pause now passes unnoticed. What once would have felt heavy now feels neutral. You are no longer aware of what is missing because you have grown used to its absence. And when awareness disappears, distance becomes permanent. This is not rejection. This is not God abandoning you. This is what happens when sensitivity fades and attention shifts. When your focus moves away from what once kept you aligned. Not suddenly, not intentionally, but gradually, through small choices, through moments you ignored, through patterns you allowed to stay. And the most dangerous part is this: you can live in that distance and still believe everything is fine. You can continue your routine, continue your beliefs, continue your life, and never stop long enough to realize that something essential is no longer active the way it used to be. Not because it disappeared, but because you stopped noticing it. Pay attention to what you no longer question. Because when distance becomes invisible, it becomes normal. And when it becomes normal, it becomes harder to confront. Not because the truth is hidden, but because you no longer feel the need to look for it. If you are not aware of the distance, That does not mean it is not there. It may mean you have already adjusted to it. There was a time when things moved you. Not everything, not all the time, but enough to remind you that something inside you was alive. You could feel conviction. You could feel peace. You could feel when something was right and when something was not. Your spirit responded. It reacted. It engaged. There was a sense that your inner life was connected to something greater, something real, something present. But now, there is less reaction, less awareness, less sensitivity. Not because life became easier, but because something inside you became quieter. You go through moments that once would have stirred something in you, and now they pass without impact. You hear things that once would have made you reflect, and now they don't reach you the same way. You experience situations that once would have made you stop, and now you continue without interruption. And at first, this can feel like stability. It can feel like control. Like you learned how to manage your emotions, how to stay balanced, how to not be affected so easily. But there is a difference between peace and numbness. Peace is alive, it is aware, it is grounded, but responsive. Numbness is quiet in a different way. It is disconnected. It does not react because it no longer feels. And when that numbness begins to grow, most people do not recognize it because nothing feels wrong enough to confront. You are not in crisis. You are not in pain. You are not even necessarily struggling. You are just there, moving forward, continuing your life, maintaining your routine, but without the depth that once made everything meaningful, without the sensitivity that once kept you aware, without the response that once connected you. This is where distance becomes deeper. Not when you feel far from God, but when you stop feeling anything at all. Because when you feel distance, there is still awareness. There is still a signal. But when you feel nothing, there is no signal, no interruption, no indication that something needs attention. And that is what makes it dangerous. Because you can remain in that state for a long time. You can live without questioning it, without examining it, without recognizing that something essential is no longer active inside you. And over time, what began as a subtle shift becomes a stable condition. Not because it was meant to be that way, but because it was never confronted. Pay attention to your lack of response, not just what you feel, but what you don't feel anymore. Because the absence of reaction is not always maturity. Sometimes it is a sign that something inside you has become disconnected from what once kept you aware. If nothing moves you, nothing corrects you. And if nothing corrects you, nothing changes. If you recognized yourself in any of this, do not ignore it. Not with fear, not with shame, but with honesty. Because none of these signs were meant to accuse you. They were meant to reveal something, to bring into the light what has been quietly happening beneath the surface. And the moment you become aware, everything can begin to change again. Not instantly, not emotionally, but intentionally. God does not disappear. He does not lose interest. He does not forget you. But there are moments when He allows distance to expose what closeness once covered, when His silence reveals what His presence once softened, not to push you away, but to show you where you stopped paying attention. You felt conviction fade. You felt prayer become empty. You became comfortable where you should have been challenged. You stopped noticing the distance. and eventually you stopped feeling anything at all. That is not the end, but it is a signal, a moment where you stop and ask yourself a question you may have avoided for a long time. Not what you believe, not what you say, but where you truly are. Because the most dangerous place is not far from God. It is believing you are close when something inside you has already shifted. And this is where you choose what happens next. Not through emotion, not through a sudden decision, but through awareness followed by action. Quiet, consistent, intentional action. You return to what you stopped valuing. You confront what you allowed to stay. You become honest about what you ignored. Not to fix everything at once, but to realign yourself step by step. Connection is not rebuilt through words alone. It is rebuilt through attention, through sensitivity, through choosing to notice again, choosing to respond again, choosing to care again about what you stopped questioning. Because what was lost was not access, it was awareness. And awareness can be restored. Do not wait for a feeling. Do not wait for something dramatic to happen. Because the same way distance grew quietly, reconnection begins quietly too. In the decisions no one sees, in the moments you choose to stop and reflect, in the willingness to face what is real instead of what is comfortable. You're not too far, but you're also not where you think you are. And if you're hearing this now, then something inside you is still listening. That is where it begins.